Welcome to Friday Focus. Rudyard Griffiths here, the chair of the Munk Debates. I'm joined by Janice Gross Stein, the founding director of the Munk School of Global Affairs. Janice, a consequential week on many fronts, but the big story has to be the announcement of a series of sweeping reciprocal tariffs by the Trump administration on Wednesday. I want to spend the show breaking this all down for our listeners and viewers with you. Let's begin, though, Janice, with just simply what this event in the Rose Garden marked. How significant do you register or weigh this event in the context of the economic history of the West and the world for the last 50 years?
It is really significant, Roger. Tariffs are higher when this whole package goes into effect than since 1909. That probably tells us everything we need to know. Higher than just before the Great Depression, when governments really didn't understand the risk of an escalating tariff war. Undoing 75, 60, depends where you want to date things, years of work. This is a seismic shift in the global trading system with really important implications for the global economy and for global security, because the two are connected.
Yeah. We're recording this on Friday morning, so lots of developments that could go on during the day as our listeners then subsequently get to the podcast this evening and onto the weekend. So just to put that caveat out there. But Janice, what we are seeing early on Friday are significant 34% matching retaliatory tariffs by China against all U.S. imports with no exemptions. Additional Chinese regulations and examinations of pharmaceuticals, critical minerals, other really key must-haves of the U.S. economy and Americans generally. Something like 95% of all U.S. heart medication related to high blood pressure is manufactured in China. So what do you make of this early Chinese response? It's different, I think, than some people expected, certainly than some people hoped. People had been hoping that up to this point, the Chinese had been very measured. They had not been, in a sense, confronting Trump. Instead, they had almost been ignoring him to the extent to which maybe they had hoped there was some way forward. But what does this big retaliatory tariff announced by China this morning mean?
You're absolutely right to start with China, Rudyard, because 54% tariffs on China, on Chinese manufacturing goods coming into the United States and those smaller countries, Vietnam, where after the previous Trump administration, manufacturers moved some of their plants. So what do we have now? We have fundamentally the Chinese with overlapping security and economic concerns. That's where these two systems join up, the security concerns and the economic ones. The pacing rival of the United States from a security perspective, imposing really significant counter tariffs, which are going to amplify the negative consequences of the tariffs that Donald Trump imposed. And all with a view to what? Let's just take 1 minute, Roger. The purpose of these tariffs, according to the president, is to encourage manufacturers to make their products in the United States. What's the likelihood that Chinese manufacturing is going to move to the United States?
Right. As in fact, there's a live issue culminating maybe in a matter of days or maybe not now because of this retaliatory tariffs from China for the United States to effectively appropriate the U.S. operations of the Chinese company TikTok owned by ByteDance. So if you're a Chinese company, boy, operating in the United States doesn't look like a lot of fun. It looks like a great way to have your assets appropriated by an administration. And then we'll see who ultimately wins the bid for TikTok America, but it kind of looks like being handed out to some of the president's closest friends and allies. But let's go back to China for a sec more, Janice, because you are right. This is the most important news that our listeners and viewers need to follow, because everything that matters in the world right now is Chimerica, the relationship between China and the United States, and what has been now years of competition, which is, Janice, I think today and the last 72 hours is now spilling over into something more than just competition. So my question is this the start of a new and potentially more dangerous and more entrenched moment between China and the United States, where both parties, instigated here by Donald Trump with these 54% punitive tariffs on China on Wednesday, now the Chinese respond with blanket 34% across the board tariffs on U.S. imports, plus other bans and regulations related, again, to absolutely critical must-have things that the American economy needs. Are we now at the point where these two superpowers are beginning to take off the gloves, and we're out of the phase of kind of feeling our way, and we're now, I don't know, pick your analogy, we're in a boxing ring, we're waving red flags in front of bulls here. What's your sense of what we've seen in the last 72 hours?
I think it is a signal moment. China did wait. For two reasons. It waited hoping to understand, to get a grip, Rudyard, on what was motivating Trump, what his goals were. In other words, like everybody else, they were trying to fit different rational explanations, different theories of the case, so they could get a handle on this. That order of magnitude response just says, we're not bothering with that anymore. And there's no question it hardens the rivalry. And, something came across my desk yesterday that I was looking at the 44 most advanced technologies in the world right now. A think tank in Australia tracks who's ahead. China is leading in 37 of those 44 advanced technologies. So the United States is, in fact, I can't think of a worse strategy in order to cut back on toys, on shoes, on clothing, and on Chinese cars. They have started, frankly, an economic Cold War. And boy, is the U.S. vulnerable to China in ways that it's not vulnerable to anybody else, perhaps.
Yeah. As you said, Janice, many times before in this program, wars are easier to start than they are to finish. And would you say that also? I guess what concerns me today is I think that maps to trade wars too, not just hot wars. That now the Chinese government, Xi himself, has come out and said, okay, the gloves are off, 34% across the board countervailing duties. Trump is out there in the Rose Garden with that crazy kind of Moses-like tablet, wandering around, throwing out MAGA hats to his cabinet officials. These two men, Janice, look dug in to some extent. Whether they want to be individually or personally or not, I don't know. But Janice, isn't this an issue now of face, and especially for the Chinese? If they back off on this, what does that say? And then if they're not backing off, what the heck does Trump do, even if he wants to back off? Because the Chinese, as we know, are not a democratic society. They have a lot more power in their leadership. If their leadership truly does want to commit to a policy and a goal, then they can pursue that, Janice, I think a lot longer and a lot harder than an American president facing a lot of division and collapsing poll numbers in the United States.
There's no question about this. We use a phrase, Rudyard, to describe tariffs and why. There are many, many, many reasons why they're not a general purpose effective tool. They can be effective to solve very specific problems, but not a general purpose tool. We call them sticky. What does a sticky tariff mean? They're so easy to put on, but they take so much effort to lift off. Once they're on, they tend to stick. right? And that's what you've just said. Except in the Chinese case, I think the stickiness is even stronger. Xi Jinping doesn't have to worry about a domestic audience. He doesn't have to worry about China's advanced manufacturing. What he does have to worry is a country that is struggling with its growth rate. And I think that's partly what explains the Trump people. They think maybe this is the moment to crush the Chinese. It's frankly nonsense. That's all I can say.
Yeah. I wonder, Janice, if there's also a parallel here to Israel before October 7th, that America's opponents, I'm not even going to call them enemies anymore because the world is so different the last 100 days, but America's opponents like China look at the United States under Donald Trump and they see a country like Israel before October 7th, a country divided, a country that is fast headed to or is in a crisis of the rule of law and maybe a major constitutional crisis in a matter of weeks. There's an important case now about these extraordinary renditions of Venezuelans to El Salvador that may well see a judge in the next week formally censure the White House and rule on obstruction. So I don't know, Janice. I guess I wonder if the Chinese aren't looking at the United States in exactly the same way, saying this nation is not up for this fight. Now is the time that we need to pull out our pen and draw a line, a series of red lines regarding the Chinese-America relationship, and we are going to push hard over the next period of time to convey to the Americans what those red lines are, because America itself has been weakened by this president.
I think, the answer to you is yes and yes. Yes, because you're right that leaders who don't come from democratic societies and democratic traditions see these kinds of court challenges, see dissent as weakness, Rudyard, right? We tend to see them as strength. We tend to say, oh, we have robust institutions. That's not how autocrats see it, and they see it as a moment of opportunity. Let's talk about something else that happened yesterday. I got lost in all the noise. Laura Loomer, uh, her national security credentials are opaque to me. Let me put it to you that
No,
way.
Janice, let's
Had
call
a
her what she is.
meeting.
She's an anti-Semite. She is someone who has engaged in the worst conspiracy theories about January 6th. She's
Yes.
an election denier. I mean, this is a deeply toxic person in American social media, just to bring our audience, who maybe thankfully have no idea who Laura Loomer is. And that's why we like you so much here at the
That's
Monk
right.
Debates, because you're
That's
not
right. I mean,
following Laura Loomer.
and I,
And she
we'd be
could
both
be
pleased, both of us, if you didn't know. She had a meeting. First of all, she was invited to the White House.
the Oval
Secondly,
Office.
she met with Donald Trump and just before and left him a list of 6 national security senior officials. All 6 were fired by the Trump administration on on Thursday. So the national security apparatus inside the United States right now is in chaos, frankly. If you're watching the United States, you understand the bureaucracy is disheveled. They are going to drop the ball. Uh, the country is roiled by some of the constitutional cases, and the United States has launched a policy which is going to increase inflation and slow growth in the United States. If you're an adversary of the United States, oh, and by the way, we left out one thing right here. Donald Trump raised tariffs against the closest allies of the United States, Europe,
Yeah,
Japan,
there's the
South
list.
Korea, the core
Yeah.
of the Indo-Pacific Alliance and the European Alliance. If you wish the United States ill and you're watching this, why wouldn't you see it as an opportunity, frankly?
Yeah. Janice, let's say goodbye to our complimentary guests and listeners and join our Monk supporters on the other side of this short break. We're going to talk about how these tariffs are spilling out in Canada here, what we got hit with or not, what it all means, and how it's impacting our federal election. That for you right after this short break.